May 19, 1944. The sea was calm that night in the western Solomon Islands, a slate-black surface broken only by white streaks of phosphorescent wake as three American destroyer escorts pushed eastward under orders that none of the sailors fully understood, only that they were told to expect contact. The three ships, USS George, USS Raby, and USS England, steamed in hunter-killer formation, with George carrying the officer in tactical command, Commander Hamilton Haynes. The men atop the darkened decks could not see beyond the limited horizon of the Pacific night, but beneath that same waterline, 7 Japanese submarines lay in fixed patrol stations forming the Imperial Navy's NA picket line. Every sailor aboard those 3 destroyer escorts felt the tension in the air, though very few could have articulated why. This night would become the beginning of the most successful anti-submarine campaign that any single warship in history would ever achieve. What the men on the decks did not know I could not know was that this exact date represented a lethal intersection point between extraordinary American intelligence, penetration, and the technological maturity of mid-war anti-submarine weapons. The officers aboard George and her consorts had been briefed only vaguely. They had been told that there had been aerial reconnaissance sightings in the area, that Japanese submarine activity was probable, and that their mission was to sweep, locate, and prosecute any contacts with the new forward-firing weapons platforms that now made destroyer escorts capable of killing submarines with speed and precision never before seen in naval warfare. In reality, there had been no friendly aircraft anywhere near the NA line. There were no reconnaissance planes. The coordinates given to the hunters did not come from wings. They came from numbers, from broken codes, from linguists under fluorescent lights in Pearl Harbor who had decoded a Japanese submarine repositioning order. But that secret, the truth, would remain invisible for decades after the war. Right now, on this night, every sailor believed they were just doing their job, just running another anti-submarine sweep. The reality was that they were stalking submarines whose exact positions were known with stunning fidelity. The moon was either thin or covered by broken cloud. Sailors and deck logs remember it as a night of limited sky, light, the kind of darkness where the horizon disappears and the horizon becomes a smooth, seamless plane of ink. Sailors could distinguish up from down only because the sky was a slightly different shade of black than the water below. The sea itself had that gentle, long-period Pacific swell, not stormy, not glassy, but rolling in a slow, deep rhythm, the kind of breathing ocean pattern that made younger sailors drowsy if they stared at it too long. It is important to understand the psychological element here. These were not veteran men in their 30s who had spent a decade at sea. Many were 19-year-olds, some barely 20, who had never seen a Japanese submarine, never heard the sound of a submerged steel hull reflecting sonar, never watched a Hedgehog pattern erupt on impact, and yet they were operating weapons whose effectiveness would be measured in seconds. The gap between training diagrams and the real moment of decisive lethal contact was razor thin. Below deck, the atmosphere was different, metallic, warm from machinery, smelling of diesel and oil. Sonar operators sat in dim rooms lit only by red lamps, wearing headphones, listening to the ocean. A sonar ping is not an explosive sound, and it is a pulse, a heartbeat echo. When the ear becomes trained, one learns to distinguish between whales, between thermoclines, between debris, between merchant hull plates, and between the unmistakable metallic acoustic profile of a submarine casing. On this night, operators aboard these 3 ships knew they were likely to hear something, but knowing emotionally and knowing intellectually are different things. The human heart always resists the arrival of the moment of truth. None of these ships had yet fired a Hedgehog in combat. They had practiced, they had drilled, they had simulated, but the weapon had not yet been used in the real crucible of war on these decks. The Hedgehog mortar racks were ready, the spigots angled, the firing mechanism armed. Each projectile, a 65-pound missile containing 35 pounds of torpex, sat ready to be launched in a forward elliptical pattern ahead of the bow. The ship would not have to pass directly over the submarine. Instead, the weapon would throw death into the future location of the enemy based on sonar bearing change rate. A weapon not of the present, but of predicted position. Above deck, the steel hulls hummed with the vibration of engines, and lookouts rotated their heads in slow arcs, scanning black water with binoculars that could not actually see anything unless a submarine surfaced. But routine at sea is also psychological discipline. You look because you are supposed to look. You scan because you are supposed to scan. You rely on sensors because your eyes see nothing. The Pacific at night is the most isolating void a human can experience short of outer space. That same night, miles ahead of them, one Japanese submarine, I-16, believed itself safe. Its captain, Lieutenant Commander Takeuchi Yoshisuke, sat in his small conning space with his senior petty officers, unaware that mathematical vectors and broken ciphers had already converted his secret coordinates into actionable firing solutions aboard American destroyer escorts. He believed he was part of a defensive screen, waiting to detect American carrier movements, waiting to send warning to the combined fleet so that Operation A-Go could be triggered at the correct moment. He believed he was hunting. In reality, he was the hunted. The night ticked past 100 hours. The watch rotation changed. Sailors wiped their eyes. Coffee pots were refilled. Cigarettes glowed in cupped palms. Every sound aboard a blacked-out warship at night is amplified. The clang of a mug, the rattle of a watertight door, the ping of radar rotation. But below deck in the sonar shack, the world existed in a different dimension. And then it happened. At 200 hours, aboard USS George, sonar operator 3rd Class Donald H. Walter stiffened. Ping, return, ping, return. Each echo reflecting off the abyss. But now, a metallic reflection. A hull plate. A return inconsistent with sea clutter. A Doppler shift indicating movement. He said it quietly, because professionals always speak quietly when the moment matters. Contact bearing 078. Range 3,600 yards. Underwater. Those words were the true beginning of the USS England's immortal 12-day campaign. In that instant, the American destroyer escorts ceased to be ships searching for possibility and became hunters driving toward certainty. The chain of procedure was immediate and calm. Sonar bearings were fed to the bridge. The bridge relayed them to the helm. The helm adjusted rudder to bring the bearing rate to 0. The attacking ship began its run. The other 2 destroyer escorts widened formation to flank arc positions. Communication was minimal, not because of stealth, but because when training has been internalized to the point of reflex, orders are redundant. Now we must slow the pace, because to understand the historic magnitude of what would follow, one must examine the geometry of the attack. A submarine submerged at moderate depth might move at 2 to 4 knots underwater. A destroyer escort could steam at 15 knots, 20 if needed. This meant that the hunting vessel had enormous tactical speed advantage, but that same speed was dangerous if it overshot the contact. Traditional depth charges forced the attacker to run over the target, lose sonar contact, then drop explosives behind her stern. The Hedgehog changed that, because now the ship could remain outside of the submarine's field of hearing, maintain sonar lock, and fire ahead. USS George carried the Hedgehog. USS England also carried the Hedgehog. USS Raby also carried the Hedgehog 3 destroyer escorts. 3 Hedgehogs, 7 fixed Japanese submarine stations. This was not battle. This was not duel. This was mathematical execution. USS George began the first attack run. England and Raby maintained parallel bearing arcs ready to take over if the submarine evaded. The Hedgehog was fired. 24 projectiles arced forward. Silent. Spinning, descending toward a predicted future coordinate. Seconds passed. Silence. 20 seconds. Silence. 30 seconds. Silence. No explosions, which meant a clean miss. But the clean miss was actually comforting, because the new weapon allowed for rapid repeat attack. Within minutes, the destroyer escorts repositioned for a second approach, and this time, USS England assumed the attack run. USS England, the young ship named for a 20-year-old officer who died in the upside-down hull of USS Oklahoma at Pearl Harbor, now carried the lethal precision of mathematics into the night sea. Her sonar operator called bearing rate change. Her fire control men computed intercept angle. Her Hedgehog mount captain gave firing clearance. The second salvo erupted forward, black against black, invisible against night. Seconds passed. Then, the ocean flashed 1, 2, 3 multiple, simultaneous detonations. A submarine had been struck. Inside I-16, Chaos erupted as Torpex charges punched holes into steel, the most terrifying event a submariner can experience. Explosive shock, underwater. Bulkheads buckled. Instruments shattered. Lights failed. Men screamed in a darkness more absolute than night on deck. On the surface, USS England and her sister ships marked the moment not with celebration, but with professionalism. Sonar men listened. No further echoes. No propeller noises. No hull reflections. Oil began to rise. Within hours, debris surfaced. The first kill of the 12-day campaign had been made. But the most chilling detail of this night was not the explosion. It was the fact that the Americans already had the coordinates of the next submarine. The dawn of May 19th had not yet broken when word was passed through radio circuits to Pearl Harbor that one submarine of the NA picket line had been destroyed. The message was short, almost clinical, because the men transmitting it had no idea that what they had just reported would become the opening entry of the most improbable streak of submarine kills in naval history. In the Combat Intelligence Unit at Pearl, the analysts already had the coordinates of the next boat on the NA line. The decrypts told them that each submarine in the chain was fixed to a specific station, each one spaced like beads on a string, each one assigned to listen and forward traffic. The Americans were not hunting random submarines. They were hunting plotted, pre-known positions. The destroyer escorts did not know that yet. They only knew that night was still deep. The ocean smelled sharp, and that oil on the surface meant they had not been chasing ghosts. The 3 DEs turned east and resumed search. For most sailors, the event of a sinking never fully registers until daylight. In darkness, every horizon is suggestion. But inside the mind, something shifts. Because once you sink an enemy, the entire crew experiences a conversion of attitude. Before the first kill, everything is theoretical. After the first kill, everything is proven. USS England now carried the psychological armor of success. The next submarine in the NA line was RO-106, positioned farther west. She was small compared to fleet boats, but built for stealthy picket work. Her captain believed dawn would be routine. He believed that after transmitting coded position reports, he would continue drift patrol. In Tokyo, there was still no alarm. The Japanese cryptographers believed their code remained secure. Their fleet still believed that when the decisive fleet battle came, the Americans would rush into the trap. They believed the American Navy, fast build rates aside, did not have the patience or the discipline to wait. They were wrong. The Americans were not reacting. They were anticipating. The trap was inverted. On the morning of May 22nd, contact. Once again, the sonar operator aboard George heard it first. Faint but distinct, a target bearing. The seas were calmer than the night of the first kill. Light was returning. The surface of the Pacific shimmered pale silver. Visibility was still limited, but the psychological advantage of daylight changed the way every man stood at his post. Everything felt clearer, sharper. The destroyer escorts closed distance. This time USS England executed the first attack run. They had rehearsed refire sequences. They had muscle memory. The Hedgehog crew members were almost surgical in operation. The attack run angle was shallow. The bearing rate approached 0. The firing signal came. 24 bombs soared. The men could not see them, but they could feel the projectile ripple through hull vibration. Everyone held breath in the same unconscious human reflex. Seconds. Then, impact. Multiple explosions. RO-106 died in silence so fast that inside the boat there would have been no coordinated reaction. Instruments would have shattered before command decisions could be spoken. Within minutes, debris began rising. Wood, insulation, fragments of the pressure hull. 2 submarines destroyed. 3 days. The American ships now accelerated east, because the station assignment grid suggested that RO-104 was next. And now something new entered the psychology of the hunt. Momentum. The sailors were no longer nervous, and they were hungry. When the sonar contact on RO-104 came, it came faster, because the operators were now attuned to the acoustic signature of picket line submarines. They had learned the Doppler nuance of Japanese hull metallurgy. Noise patterns have national signatures the same way handwriting does. The Hedgehog pattern fired. RO-104 perished within moments. The sea boiled with spreading oil and debris. 3 kills. Within the Japanese command chain, no one even knew they had lost contact with those submarines. Because radio silence policy was strict, if a picket submarine did not report, it was assumed that atmospheric skip problems had interfered. No panic yet. The NA line was believed intact. What made this entire 12-day sequence chilling is that the Americans did not slow down after each kill. They accelerated. By the time RO-116 was detected on May 23rd, the crews had become a unified organism. Hedgehog fire control felt like reflex. The ships maneuvered like muscle fibers. USS England attacked and hit. The submarines shattered. The sailors no longer reacted physically because they had now transitioned beyond excitement into the calm of mastery. 4. Submarines down, next RO-108, then RO-105. The Japanese had no idea yet that the NA line was gone, but the hydrophone operators on the last submarine, RO-105, sensed something the others had not. They detected the distant propeller rhythms of multiple destroyer escorts. They knew something was wrong. RO-105 attempted evasive maneuvers and deep turn, ballast adjustment, pattern break. But every evasive act calls attention because sonar sees directional change as Doppler signature spike. USS England pursued. George flanked. Raby screened. This last fight took 2 days. RO-105 fought. She evaded 4 attacks. She survived 5 Hedgehog runs. But sonar is relentless. Computers may not have existed as we know them, but human-machine integration aboard a destroyer escort in 1944 was a mechanical brain. Bearings, plotting boards, rate changes, intercept corrections, all done with chalk and pencil and headphones. England ran the 6th attack run, fired, waiting. Then, it happened. 5 distinct underwater detonations almost simultaneously, one of the most distinctive acoustic patterns of a catastrophic hull kill recorded in the war. The oil bloom on the Pacific was thick. It was May 31st, 12 days. 6. Submarines. 1 ship. No one has ever repeated this. No ship has ever equaled it. When USS England turned back toward port, the men were no longer 19-year-old sailors discovering war. They were participants in a statistical impossibility. Everyone on board understood at some level, though they did not verbalize it, that they had just done something that would not simply be recorded, but would likely never occur again. And of all ironies, when England returned to port, she was ordered to escort convoys. As if she were just another destroyer escort. As if the most lethal anti-submarine predator in naval history had not just rewritten mathematics. Years later, when Fleet Admiral King looked back, he said something that became legend. There will always be an England in the United States Navy. He meant it symbolically and historically, because what USS England did was not just successful, it was impossible, and it actually happened.